Each corner.
That's last.
Each corner.
This one.
He's all right. I'll tell you about that in a sec. Good evening, good evening. Got a good crowd for a Tuesday, very good. Gather round, don't make me shout, it takes a lot of poppers that.
Oh, excuse me.
Well, good evening folks, my name's Richard, and if you haven't already guessed, I'm the Ripon Hornblower for tonight. Bit of a giveaway. Now, you might know where I'm from. Ripon, for anyone who hasn't already guessed. I like to know where people have come to see me from, because it's sometimes quite interesting. We've got a big crowd tonight, so we're going to play a little game that I like to call Are You From Further Than? It involves audience participation, this dread called upon the crowd. What you do, pop your hands up. Pop your hands up. Now if you're from Ripon, put your hands down. Okay, still a few. If you're from Yorkshire, put your hands down. We did a few out there. If you're from the north of England, put your hands down. Still got a few. If you're from England, put your hands down. Oh, we're doing well. If you're from the United Kingdom, put your hands down. I had someone the other day say I'm from South Wales. I was like, Okay, so we've got a few still from abroad. Where are you from?
Australia.
Australia? I think you've probably won.
You won.
Yourself?
California.
California, just as grand.
Houston.
Houston, Texas,
Yeah.
Lovely. Yourself?
Australia.
Australia as well.
Germany.
Germany, brilliant.
Queensland.
Queensland, Australia. Houston, Texas. Oh, fantastic. We've got an international crowd tonight. That's fantastic, even better. Well, however far you've travelled, wherever you've come from, you're just as welcome to come. We love it when people come to see us because it means we get to talk about something that's quite dear to our hearts. Now, what you've just seen me do there is a ceremony called Setting the Watch, and if legend is true, dates back to the year 886. That make it 1,132 years old. The longest continuing tradition in the UK, possibly Europe, and maybe even the world. Something we're very, very proud of. Now, 886 weren't very nice times in England. They were Saxon times, but we'd been invaded by the Vikings not long before. They'd raided most of the way down the east coast, covering parts of Scotland, all the way down to London. The Saxons at the time were being led by a king called Alfrith. King Alfrith of the West Saxons. Anyone know Alfrith?
Not personally.
What other name was he known by?
Alfred the Great.
Alfred the Great. Anyone know Alfred the Great? Yes.
He's
Or
related
not,
to it.
yes. Wasn't a good cook. No, he was not. There was that bake-off scandal. He did burn the woman's cooks. We'll gloss over that though. Because he was actually a pretty great king, that's how he got the name. He managed to push the Vikings out of London and fight them and push them further north. Eventually they settled on a bit of an uneasy peace. The Vikings would leave the south alone, which was a pretty good deal for the King of Wessex. Meant his lands were safe. But in return they'd keep the north, known as the Danelaw territories, lands of Danish law. That covered all of this area, as it was back then, the Kingdom of Northumbria. Now, we're told in 886 that Alfred came upon a small Saxon settlement inside those now Viking borders called In Ripon. There's a gold star for anyone who can guess what that's called today. Sometimes doesn't take a genius, this history, like it helps me out quite a lot. Now, he came to the small Saxon settlement and, for some reason, we're not entirely sure, decided to grant the settlement a charter to make it a city. Some thought is that we're about 20 odd miles away from Jorvik, or York, the Vikings' main base of operations, possibly a good place to keep an eye and send word south. Other thought is we were a small Saxon settlement surrounded by Vikings. It was probably just a sign of good faith to say, good on you, keep being Saxon. Well done. Either way, being a time of war, he supposedly didn't have any paper on him at the time. Shame. So instead, he gave us a bit of old dead cow. What he gave us was one of these, if you haven't already guessed, a signal horn or a blowing horn. And it was his horn that he gave us. He took it off his shoulder and said, this will serve as my promise to the city. So now we had a horn and a charter, but what on earth do you do with a horn?
Blow it.
Blow it. We decided to put it to a bit better use than just blowing it though. We decided to give it to our Wakeman. Now the Wakeman would stay awake during the hours of darkness so everyone else could go and sleep safe, and he'd keep watch over the city. We gave the horn to him, and that's how this started. He'd blow the horn at the four corners of the settlement to let people know his watch had started, and he was on his rounds, he could go and sleep safe. Following that, he'd patrol the city. If he saw any Vikings, a few sharp blasts would wake people up, and they'd go and fight them off. Bit of an early warning system. Worked pretty well, because we're still here. Well done, Ripon of 886. Now, over the years, the Wakeman did slowly evolve. He became responsible for law and order in the city as well. It made sense. He was up after dark. He'd keep an eye out for people burgling, mugging, etc. Up to no good. See a few out tonight as well. And that remained pretty well constant until 1604. Now in the time, Ripon had actually become quite a prosperous city. We had a good trade in the wool industry thanks to local abbeys. There's Fountains Abbey a couple of miles out that way, Jervlow, Riblow and Midlow. They had a lot of sheep, a lot of wool, and the money flowed fairly freely through Ripon because of the trade. We were quite happy with that. Now unfortunately that doesn't always last. A bloke named Henry decided he didn't like his wife anymore, and the lovers' tiff that followed brought an end to the Catholic Church in England, started the Church of England, and destroyed those monasteries. So, the wool was gone, the money was gone, Ripon was a bit miffed. Not only that, but the guiding hand of the church, keeping an eye over the Wakeman, was also gone. And in the next 70 odd years, he was a bit of a law unto himself. The Wakeman had been appointed by the 12 aldermen of the city and serves a 1-year term in office. They learnt pretty quickly to appoint one of themselves. He'd appoint the other 11 as his constables, and they'd do as they liked. It's a bit of a closed shop. Now, we know during this time that they made up laws for themselves. One such law recorded in the Town Book of 1598 is written as, whomsoever should misuse or by-call the Wakeman by the use of slanderous language shall be locked in the stocks for the period of a day and a night. As far as I'm aware, they never got round to recalling that law, or at least that's what I tell local youths on a Friday night. Don't let on. They also doled out punishments as they saw fit. Whippings and lashings were fairly common in the old marketplace on the other side of those buildings. And they could also round up any livestock that got out in the night and put them in the penfold, charge you to get them back in the morning, or eat them for breakfast, depending on how hungry they were. Wasn't all bad though. They did still patrol the city, and it was still their job, if your house was burgled or you were mugged during the hours of their watch, they were to make good by way of financial compensation. So it's not all bad. You got to pay out. Bit of early insurance. Now, as we all know, insurance isn't too cheap. To afford the insurance, they put in a tax on the city. Anyone know the famous window tax?
Yes.
Few nods, yes. There's a good example. What used to be the Lloyds Bank, now the vacant building, top left window of that building with the for sale sign is bricked up and repainted on to avoid paying for it. Now, although Ripon did have a window tax, this wasn't the tax that the Wakeman put in place. No, he was from Ripon, he was a clever fella, as we all are. He put in a door tax. Yeah, you're not going to brick up your front doors, are you? The charges for the tax were 4p if your door faced directly onto the square, or 2p down a side alley or ginnel. Now if you look around the square, you'll see an awful lot of side alleys and ginnels. People did genuinely brick up the front door and make one around the side. It was more cost effective. Now, like I say, in 1604 there was a big change. In 1604 we had a visit from a second monarch. This time it was King James I, or King James VI if there's anyone from Scotland. I do translate that. Now, King James had heard of the Wakeman and knew what he was up to, and he wasn't best pleased. So he came to Ripon and he said, right, I'm going to give you a new charter. This one's going to be a written one on proper paper, lots of fancy writing and a big wax seal at the bottom. But to get it, you're going to sort yourselves out. You're going to get rid of this Wakeman fella. You're going to put in a proper council, elected by all the people of Ripon and headed by a proper mayor. That's what we did, because you don't argue King Jimmy. Guy Fawkes found out a few years later. You don't argue King Jimmy. So, we put in a proper council. We put in a mayor. As it happened, the last Wakeman, a man named Mr. Hugh Ripley, actually became the first mayor of Ripon as well. And tradition has it, the house on the corner, which you can't see because of the Ripon Farm Services van, but it has got four bay windows and a pointy roof. If you look around the Farm Services van, you'll see it. It's known as Wakeman's house. Everyone locally knows it. That's Wakeman's house. It's where Mr. Ripley lived. Although if you're from Ripon Civic Society, they put the green plaque on the Halifax. I'll leave it at that. So Mr. Ripley wanted to see the ceremony of setting the watch continue. The ceremony was now ceremonial. It didn't need to be done because we had clocks. But they did it still ceremonial. He wanted to see it continue because he liked it. But he also knew sometimes it's not the nicest job. Sometimes it's rainy or snowy or windy, whatever. Sometimes you just want to be tucked up in bed with a hot chocolate. So, instead of doing it himself, he employed someone to do it for him. And that's what we are. I am a hornblower who works for the mayor. Shush. I'm busy. Now, Mr. Ripley didn't fully trust his first hornblower. Word is that he had a bit of a proclivity for the pub. That's still true. But he added a second part to the ceremony when that change came in 1604. Following the setting of the watch on the market square, the hornblower shall report to the mayor's abode of the evening, I think was the official language used, giving the mayor a little bit of flexibility where they wanted to sleep. Or perhaps who with. So, finding the mayor, the hornblower shall sound the horn 3 times, bow the head, doff the cap, and repeat the words, Mr. Mayor, the watch is set. And that's still done to this day. So following this, I will be off out to the mayor's house, about a mile that way, stand beneath the mayoral lamppost, which moves whenever we get a new mayor every year. Yeah, lots of digging up roads. Great. Sound my horn 3 times, repeat the words, Mr. Mayor, the watch is set, and her neighbours simply love it. Yeah. Her dogs love it more. She's got about 4 of them, I think, now. They start barking about now, waiting for me to arrive. Now, the mayor is allowed a life. They are at functions within the city sometimes, and it's then my job to go and interrupt proceedings. Sometimes very fun. Concerts, pantos, Masonic dinners. I've had a lot of them. They've been quite fun. Other times the mayor is allowed to go out the city. They're not tied down to stay here. They're allowed holidays. They do go out the city for some reasons, and it's then our job to do it at the town hall steps, which is the official residence of the mayor of Ripon and bears the original lamppost above the doorway. Partly because superstition is that the horn should not be sounded outside of Ripon, but mainly because they don't want to pay me mileage. Now, since 1604, it's remained that way ever since. The ceremony has been done every night of every day of every year. As far as we are aware, it has never been missed. Now, if you've been in Ripon a while, or if you've been looking around Ripon, you may have noticed there's a particular symbol or theme attached to Ripon. I wonder what that could be.
Yeah.
Horns are everywhere in Ripon. They are everywhere. If you look at the benches, they're actually made of a horn. The green plaques have horns on them. The signposts, some of them have horns on them. They're everywhere. Now in the town hall we have countless horns, because whenever someone visits Ripon, a dignitary or clergy member, they think it's the best gift for us, because we don't obviously have enough. But despite the number of horns we have, only 4 have ever done this. It's something quite special. We keep it for a select few. The original horn of 886 that was supposedly given to us by King Alfred does still exist. It's kept in the town hall. It's far too fragile to be blown now, so it's capped with silver, covered in black velvet. So the original horn is completely covered. You can't see any of it. But it is still brought out on certain ceremonies. It's paraded through the city on certain civic occasions, and it's brought out for silver talks in the town hall as well. That hangs on a wide black baldric or strap. It's not just a character in Blackadder. And that has 66 silver badges of previous Wakeman and mayors on it. It's quite beautiful. Now that one did us very well. That lasted 800 years before it was replaced. It was replaced in 1690 by the only horn we ever bought, because no one had started giving them to us then. We were a bit miffed about that. We had to buy one. We know how much they paid for it because they wrote it in the town book of 1690 in fairly colourful language for the time. That the thieves, rogues and vagabonds, pardon my French for the younger ones, did charge the fair city of Ripon the princely sum of 6 shillings and 8 for a blowing horn. They were absolutely outraged at that price, 6 shillings and 8. Any guesses as to what that's worth now?
33 1/3.
Exactly. Just around about 34p, 33 1/3. They were outraged at the price though, because it was worth a lot more back then. Some say you can still hear the cries of how much come from the town hall today. Although that might just be them looking at the latest bills. But we do have a bit of a reputation in the north of England for being a bit, I was going to say frugal. But yeah, short arms, long pockets, I think is the That horn is still in use today because we like to get our money's worth out of it. And in fact still bears the price tag. A little joke I like, but it does have a little brass plaque just about here on the horn that says this horn was bought by the city of Ripon for 6 shillings and 8 in the year 1690. Or words to that effect. I think I've got them wrong, but it's roughly about that. That one again did us fairly well. That lasted until 1865 before it was replaced, and that was this one. This one was bought for us in 1865 by the mayor of the day, Mr. Bower. The reason he bought it was because it was just simply the largest horn he'd ever seen. Why not? It certainly is a large horn, but compared to the others, it's huge. We believe it's African ox. It's certainly far too big to be anything native. For a bit of reference, the other two, from the tip here, the end here, the 886 horn comes to about where this brass ends. The other two come to about here on it. But the brass for theirs, this has got brass to about here, the actual horn would end about there. The brass for theirs goes all the way down to about here, and the actual horn would be about that one. So this one, compared to the others, is absolutely massive. Now, the fourth horn we got was in 1986. That was given to us by Sigma Antiques just down the hill. Wayne, who uses that horn, was born in 1986 and tries to tell us it was made for him. But we disagree and we remind him otherwise. There is a fifth horn that's visible at all times but never been blown in the traditional sense. Any guesses? Up there, exactly. 93 feet above our heads at the top of the obelisk. There is a fleur-de-lis, a rowel, which is the spiky part of the spur. We made them in the 1700s. And a gilded blowing horn. Now the blowing horn is a weather vane and is also a time capsule. Supposedly sealed in 1889 with 7 gold sovereigns inside to be opened 100 years later. Now, being the old gal she is, the obelisk has needed some repairs over the years, and unfortunately 1886 was one of those years. 1986 was one of those years. So, a bit of dispute as to why they brought it down early. Some say because it was 1986, 1,100 years celebration, gung-ho for horn blowing. I think they just didn't want to pay for the scaffolding 3 years later. So they brought the horn down early and took it into the town hall to open it up. Some say that was bad luck. I agree. They did not find 7 gold sovereigns inside. Any guesses as to what they found?
IOU.
Close. It's what I like to call a you owe us. It was a bill for the last time it was cleaned. Unpaid. And a little note that said words to the effect of, there were never any sovereigns, you've all been had, I'm off to the pub. This is the north of England, you've got to be careful what you do with your money. It's not even safe 93 feet in the air. We did seal it back up for another 100 years. We've put a few more interesting things in there. A set of Monday money the Queen had given us in 1985, some council documents, local paper, and, to stick to tradition, a bill for the cleaning. Although I'm told it was paid before I went up. I'll wait for the night an angry cleaner just shouts out at me in the crowd, "No, it wasn't!" Now, one last thing, you probably noticed that I bowed to the corner to the Ripon Farm Services van at the end. Now, I wasn't actually bowing to the Ripon Farm Services van, I was bowing to the Wakeman house just behind it, as a sign of respect to Mr. Ripley, also as a bit of a superstition. It's a long-held superstition by us horn-blowing folk that should the horn not be sounded to Mr. Ripley's satisfaction, his ghostly face will appear at the top attic window, which is why I had to walk aside and try and look at it when I finished. Not only will his ghostly face appear, but also a plague shall befall the city. Terrifying stuff. I've never seen him myself. I've been pretty lucky, I think. I've only been doing it since September, though, so I think he's been letting me off light. My colleague Jim says he saw him once, though, in 2011, on the 3rd of January. Bitterly cold night, he said. Came out, blew a reasonable note on the first corner, but disaster struck us on the second corner, and the metal mouthpiece, being as cold as it was, froze to his lips. He couldn't get a sound out. Yeah. Painful as well, sounds like. He's got quite a healthy tash as well, so I'm assuming some of that was pulled out when he managed to pull it away. But he managed this note on the 3rd and 4th corners. He swears on his life that as he turned and bowed, he saw the ghostly face at the top attic window. Now, whether or not he was telling the truth, or if he just spent a little too long in the unicorn before he came out, we'll never really know. But what we do know is that at 9:03 on the 3rd of January 2011, Ripon was struck by an earthquake measuring 3.6 on the Richter scale. Coincidence? Probably, but I'm not taking my chances. That's it from me, folks. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if you want any pictures, I'm more than willing. But if anyone wants to get off, good night and sleep safe for the watches.
Thank you.